We have two raffle prizes: a middleweight fishing rod and reel combo. Jeff is holding them up there, and there's a heavy-duty tackle box. It's really quite something. The raffle will be drawn at the end. We're going to ask Dr. Rachel Guy to pick the winner, and that'll be while Dave DeVore is speaking. The program looks something like this. We have a lot of pictures today. We've had a lot of events. We had a wonderful fly fishing clinic. We had a fantastic kids fishing derby. I think there were like 340 some odd fish caught by about 80 kids. And then we have, of course, the reason why you're here, to listen to Dr. Guy Rachel. And then we'll have Dave DeVore wrap up the meeting. Fishing stories. Does anybody have a fishing story you'd like to share with us at this point in time? This gentleman has a fishing story he wants to share with us, doesn't he? Big crowd tonight. Okay, you wait till we have a bigger audience. All right, well, we'll talk about the fly fishing clinic. I guess some of you that are here tonight probably attended this fly fishing clinic. I heard it was extremely successful. We have a couple of people that caught their first fish. This young lady on the lower, your left, my right. That's the first fish she's ever caught. And I understand she's gone out and bought a fly rod as a result. And of course, on the other side is Paulette. Well, Paulette is a CCA board member, and she's pretty proud about catching that fish. But anyway, if you want to know where you can catch fish on the island, hopefully you all have a fishing lagoon guide. So the lagoon guide identifies all 151 lagoons, whether they're brackish, freshwater, or saltwater. Gives you some tips as to the types of bait to use and the type of equipment to use. It also has a little section in it on inshore saltwater fishing. It's quite something. We like a little donation if you wouldn't mind making a donation of at least $10. And you can get that by calling this phone number or seeing Hal Evans in the back of the room. And now I'd like to ask Dave to come up and talk about the kids fishing derby.
So during the course of the year, we have three major events. The Kids Fishing Derby is one of them, along with the banquet we have earlier in May. And then we have the big oyster roast in first week of December. So coming back from COVID, last fall, we had a fishing derby, and there were about 44 kids attended. That was the bad news. The good news is the kids caught an average of 9 fish each. So the fishing was fantastic last year. This year we caught a few more fish, but we had twice as many kids. So the kids averaged 4 fish each. We had 88 kids there. And half of the kids, first fish they'd ever caught. 44. So a lot of squealing going on. And we usually have the kids, if we can't get them to kiss the first fish and throw it back for good luck. And that was kind of yucky, but we always have fun doing that. We have some good sponsors every year that come through for us. Pastor is one of them. And you can check out the other sponsors there. And they donate about $300. They donate $300 each to get their name put up on the sign. It's a big deal for us. And there's some of the winners. We have different age categories there. To be sure I'm going the right way. So once again, 88 kids caught 344 fish in about an hour and 15 minutes. The attention span begins to wane after an hour. And the tolerance of the parents and the grandparents there, but a lot of smiley faces there. The lagoon, the kids' lagoon, about 5-6 years ago, we used to use it once a year for 3 hours. That was how the kids' lagoon was used. And then we put some changes in place. We built the outdoor education center. We built a nice shed for the storage of equipment, and we put Rick Armstrong and Ken Zeich in place, and they feed those fish every day. Right now in the morning, what time is it, Rick? 10:30 every morning. If you want to have an adventure, take your grandkids out there yourself, and all the feeders, all 5 feeders go off pretty much simultaneously, and the fish are popping up all over. We've got 5 feeders around the perimeter. We want the fish not to congregate in one area. We like them to be dissipated throughout the lagoon, and it's worked really well. There's some more pictures of the kids fishing. I was down there with my 3 grandsons the night before last, and they caught a little over a dozen fish in about 45 minutes. And the size of the bluegill, I could hardly get my hand around it to get the hook out of them. They are massive. So they're well fed, Rick, well fed. So the shed that we have down there, we have about 80 rods and reels set up for kids. Frank Wood, among others, maintains them on a regular basis. They have to go to the hospital periodically. They do get tangled. We lose hooks, we lose this, we lose that. But so we're ready for groups. We have 2 more groups coming in. I'll talk to you about later in the wrap up too. So this is not over. A lot of kids catching fish. A lot of happy. These are items we acquire from Bass Pro. Those are tackle boxes. Bass Pro has been a very good partner for us, and they've been very generous. Now I'd like to introduce, where does all this money come from that we buy all this tackle with, Frank? You have any idea?
We have, again, this year, we collected almost what our goal was, which was $25,000. And I think we're going to get there before the year's up. Because in order to do the things that we do every year, we really need to raise that kind of money. It's not a lot compared to some of the other organizations on the island, but we do a lot with it. All of the structures, if you've seen the decoys floating in lagoons, those marked structures that the fish have available for younger ones for the little ones to hide in, and for the big ones to go hunt in. And we stock and maintain salinity levels, and it just we squeeze what we can out of it, and we do that pretty much every year, and it pays for the kids lagoon as well. I don't have any other questions, except if you want to get a hold of me, I guess there's another slide here. If you want to make a donation, the easiest way to do it is to go to CCASkidaway.org and hit the click here to donate. Every little bit helps.
Thank you, sir. All right. So this slide is up here just to let you know that if you miss a meeting, we would like to have you here. But if you're not here and you want to see what's been happening, you can just go on YouTube and go to the CCA Skidaway site, and you can watch the entire presentation. We're being recorded as we speak. So let's move on. Introduction of our guest speaker, Dr. Guy Rachel. She's been working in this part of the world since about 2012. And she's been working on her getting a doctorate, which she obtained from the University of Georgia, 2018. And I can't pronounce the word estuarine. Is that the right way? Is that right? So I've been practicing that word for days. I'm going to invite you up here so you can talk about this program.
So my name's Dr. Rachel Guy. I am the research coordinator for the Sapelo Island National Estuarine Research Reserve, or SINER, because that is a mouthful to say every single time. And I'm here to talk to you tonight a little bit about the Estuarine Fish Monitoring Cooperative, which is this novel idea that a group of us came up with in order to monitor fish within our estuaries over the long term. So just to give you a brief outline of what I'm going to go over, I want to give an introduction to myself, very brief. I'm going to skip over some stuff that will lead into the background of what the EFMC is, or the Estuarine Fish Monitoring Cooperative. That's also a mouthful, so I'll be calling it the EFMC, or just the cooperative. And what's next for the cooperative, and then we'll take any questions you have about it. So I wanted to just go over first where the organization is that I come from to help you understand it. So what is a NER? A NER is a National Estuarine Research Reserve, and there are 30 of them throughout the United States. And all the coastal states, we also include the Great Lakes part of the, as a coast as well. You'll see Louisiana does not have its own NER, but that is in the works right now. So hopefully we will soon be represented in every single coast. And what this is it's a partnership between a state entity and the feds or NOAA. And the state entity can be a university, it can be state government, it can even be a nonprofit. And the benefit of this network of reserves is that we're all doing water quality monitoring, weather monitoring exactly the same way at all of our reserves. We have this nationwide network of water quality for all of our estuaries within the US. But we also, since we're all in our own states, in our own places, we do local and regionally relevant research that matters to Georgia, that matters to our estuaries, not necessarily to New York's or Texas. We also do local outreach, training, and education that focuses on our reserves and what we learn from the research. So our state partner is the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Resource Division. Y'all are probably more familiar with working with the Coastal Resource Division, where you see the reefs, probably with palmetters. They are a partner that we work with on a lot of our other projects. But the state partner that has helped create the NER, which is on Sapelo Island, you can see here this yellow outline is actually the reserve boundary. But my research does not have to be within just the reserve. I actually see my interests as the estuaries beyond and all throughout Georgia. So like I said, I am the research monitoring coordinator. I've been angling all my life, but I mostly know freshwater fish. Okay, thanks. Freshwater fish, that's the yellow perch, clearly not from around here, I don't think. I have, this was I caught in Western Maryland on an annual fishing trip I've been doing for almost a decade now. But I've been the research and monitoring program coordinator for Steiner since 2016. And just giving you a really brief background, I have my bachelor's in business, as one does before they go into fishery. Then in wildlife ecology, this is all from Wisconsin, but I went even further from the coast and water to New Mexico, where I really, actually, that was where I got into fish quite a bit. And I could tell you this story another time, but I don't think I have time for it tonight, about a fish in the desert that really got me interested. It's this fish, it's an endemic species in the middle of the desert. It's called the white sands pupfish. And in fact, we have its cousin living right here in our estuaries. So our estuaries are kind of extreme environments for fish to live in. So the fact that they can and can also, you know, live in the desert, whoops, backwards, is pretty incredible. So this is the sheep's head minnow that you will often find on top of the marsh grasses and in the marsh platform in our salt marshes. So I have my PhD through the University of Georgia. And what I did focus my research on was the spatial effects of sea level rise on Georgia's juvenile fish and their habitat. And the reason I did this was because I recognized, and it is recognized in science, how important our estuaries are for the growth of our fish that we actually like to catch, to eat, for sport or for commercial reasons. This is a really important forage fish. You guys have a name for this fish? I've heard it called a lot of things. Its official common name is the bay anchovy, but I've heard it called clear minnows, glass minnows, silver minnows, lots of different. It's the most common species and most abundant fish species we have in our estuaries. Most people don't know much about it. And then who wants to guess what this is? No, that's a juvenile redfish. That is, when they're small, they don't look much like their adult. I mean, he's kind of taken the shape of their adult form, but you can just see the spot starting to form on its tail. So estuaries provide really important nursery habitat. They provide areas, because they're shallower, for predator avoidance. And they provide important foraging habitat where they can find their prey. So what my research showed when I was looking at these spatial effects is that I saw if you projected for sea level rise over different scenarios, how much habitat was either going to be gained or lost over that time. And what I found was that it's not an equal story. Some species benefit and some don't. There's going to be winners and there's losers. So for instance, richness is actually species diversity. How many fish species are actually in the are in the waters, and you can see we have about 0.7 meters of sea level rise, 1 meter of sea level rise, and 1.5 meters of sea level rise out to 2075. And we see a little bit of loss in species richness up here, but then a little bit more, maybe about 5% of their habitat lost. Atlantic croaker, they have kind of the same story for the lower levels, but wow, they really like it when they get more, their habitat actually gains with more sea level rise. I have some species that do great and some that don't. The bay anchovy is one that was predicted by the models not to do as well. So then I got to looking at the data that I put. This is the DNR juvenile trawl surveys, and they discontinued the survey in 2015. And I looked from the data from 2006 to 2015. And what I saw was a very significant real decline in fish species diversity, a really significant decline in bay anchovy and menhaden. Atlantic croaker, this is not, it looks like it's going down, but it's not significant. It wasn't actually a pattern, so they're doing okay. Spot's doing fine. White shrimp were declining and brown shrimp were declining. For the same reasons. We know that black gill disease was a real problem during this time. One thing that got me interested when I was looking at this data, though, is this one little outlier. And it's all happening at each of the same year, so in 2010. And they all showed this outlier of higher abundance than the rest of the time. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on there. And so I'm like, well, maybe there's an environmental reason that we're seeing this. And so I looked at a lot of different things. I looked at precipitation. I looked at average water temperatures. I looked at salinity. The one thing that came out, whoops, is winter water temperature. So this is taken from the long-term water quality monitoring program that we have on Sapelo. And we've been monitoring since 1999, and this goes to 2019. And what you can see, this is the average winter water temperature taken over a 15-day average for each of these years. And what we see is an increasing trend. And this is a significant trend of our water temperatures are warming over this period of time. This is 2010. This is 2006 to 2015 right here. So imagine this is where those trend lines for the fish species were. Ignore the stuff out here for right now. This is the lowest temperature within that timeline. So I'm wondering, maybe that low temperature actually boosts population for those species or the abundance of those species for those particular years. Isn't that interesting? But this is just one point. This is the building of a question. It's not an answer to a question. Because the truth of the matter is a lot of things that happen in our oceans and in our estuaries. This is the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and it's measuring the surface temperatures of the water. And you can see we have some periods that span a decade or two where it's cold or getting cold for a decade, and then it warms up, and then we have warmer than average, and it goes through cycles. So I have no way of knowing what is natural variability versus real change. The only way you could know that is having long-term, multi-decade monitoring data. And I'm arguing that you need to have it for the entire area of the fish's habitat. So not just in the large sounds and offshore here, but you need to be up in these little back marshes where the juvenile fish are making their nursery habitat. Problem with monitoring is that it's really expensive, and it is resource expensive. You need people who are skilled. They have to know how to use the equipment. They have to know how to, pilot a boat. They have to know how to identify fish. And you need the equipment, and that's expensive too. You need the gas, you need the boat, you need the nets or whatever equipment that you're going to use to catch the gear to catch the fish. And then you need time to do it. It takes quite a bit of time, and a lot of these monitoring programs do end up failing because they run out of one of these things. They don't have the personnel to do it, the equipment breaks, they can't do it, or they just don't have the time because other things you can pray. So I got to thinking about this because I was, because the juvenile fish monitoring program ended in 2015 or 2016 with the DNR, I was like, well, how could we do this? And I thought about it, I'm like, well, there's a lot of groups on the coast that have some of the resources. They don't have all three. They have the skilled personnel and a boat, but they don't have the time. They have the time and the skilled personnel, but they don't have the equipment. Time, but they don't have the skilled personnel. So I thought, what would happen if we all pooled these partial resources together? If we were all committed to the same goal of making this monitoring happen, what if we pooled all these partial resources together? And then we invite other people with partial resources to come in and join it. And then we have a lot of resilience and sustainability within this system. Because if one group has to drop out, you have all these other groups that can fill in for them at the time. So you're not depending on one organization to run the entire program. And this is where the Estuarine Fish Monitoring Cooperative was born. This was the first idea that we had for it. And this is the logo that's got a little distorted. The first team for the Estuarine Fish Monitoring Cooperative, but I hope not the only team, was Siner, Marine Extension Services, UGA, Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources, the Marine Institute at UGA Marine Institute, or UGAMI, which a lot of people are familiar with on Siner or on Sapelo Island, and the College of Coastal Georgia. And we started this in 2020. And we decided our purpose is overall to understand the responses of estuarine biota, or fishes and crabs and shrimp, changes in climate, sea level, and associated surface water conditions that are critical to fishery management and ultimately to managing for adaptive capacity and the resilience in coastal communities. And secondly, and this was really important to me because when I came out here as a new PhD student, I had a boat and no experience. And if you've never taken a boat out in estuarine waters, it was quite a challenge. And I think I found we didn't even have a depth finder or any kind of electronics on board. I found every single sandbar. I had my techs up front with a pole, poking where I thought it was shallow to see if we could find a way through. So I wanted to create a training experience that not only gave future coastal science hands-on experience in fish and the science of it, but also the practical skills of it. How do you work on a boat? How do you pilot a boat? How do you trailer a boat? And then also bring in citizen scientists too for on-the-water research training in estuarine marine ecosystems. I think it's so important so that once people get involved with it, they really do start caring about it a lot more. So to the nitty-gritty of where we're trawling and what we've been doing, we do monthly juvenile fish trawls at 33 locations in Sapelo Sound, Doughboy Sound, and Altamaha Sound. Each of these red dots are a trawl location. They are stratified to be as for distance from the mouth of the estuary into the back estuaries here. They're also stratified by salinity. If there is a salinity gradient within the estuary, there's not much of one in Sapelo Sound. So Altamaha Sound, as many of you know, it's a huge freshwater river, so that tends to be our freshest system. Doughboy's kind of in between. And then Sapelo really has no freshwater input whatsoever, so it is very salty. It's more like Wausau Sound up here. And then we organize the data in a central database that is accessible to our researchers, fishery managers, and educators. Each of these diamonds here you see is a long-term water quality monitoring site, so we can actually tie the data eventually to what we're getting. To the trawl data and to the to the water data as well. The way we're doing this is we're using hand-pulled or, well, it's pulled by the boat, but hand-deployed modified bait trawls. You can see that here. It's got a fine mesh sleeve inside the cod end. And we pull them for 5 minutes at each station at low speed. So we do about each team. Oops, oh no. Each team does about 11 stations, so they do 1 sound per month, and that takes about 2 days. So 5 stations one day, 6 stations the next. So about 3 or 4 hours per day that we work out there. When we catch and we bring the net in, we're really trying to get all the individuals back into the water as soon as we can. We're not trying to kill them. So we count every single individual. We separate them by species, and we take length measurements of up to 30 individuals of each species. So I'll get into a little bit of the data in a moment. I wanted to talk about our training program. And again, as I said, this training program was important to introduce our potential volunteers or people in the future who want to get involved with this to what we were doing. I initially just brought volunteers out and realized that was not a good idea because I spent so much more time explaining to them what we were doing than actually doing it. So our coastal training program coordinator, Brittany Dodge, she came up with a training manual. We have the training broken into 3 parts. There's the manual, the classroom, and then actually the hands-on experience actually getting out and trawling. So in the classroom, we have the actual classroom portion for 1 hour. We usually do it over a 2-hour period. So we have a classroom portion where we explain what we're doing, kind of like I'm doing right now, with the students. And then at the second hour, we take them out and we do a little bit of mock practice where they can feel what it's like to be on a small skiff and moving around in small quarters with other people, because we're not on a big shrimp boat. We are on small skiffs. We give them knot tying skills and teach them some how to measure a fish, how do you handle a fish. And we do this all on the land. So once they're comfortable with that, and if they decide they want to sign up for it, well, the best way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. And that's what we do. We bring them out on our actual live trawling events. And at that point, they at least have an idea of what they're doing. And then we can get it more into the fish identification and they can get practice. So this is a little bit of the data that we had for the first year. Our first year was kind of a pilot year, seeing what works and what didn't work. But I'm still really pleased with what we got. So from March 21st to January 22nd, or March 2021 to January 2022 of this year, at this point when I analyzed this data, we had done over 230 trawls between 3 teams. And we encountered 83 different species in our estuaries. I wonder how many people know that we even have 83 different fish species in our estuaries out there. And we counted 42,000 individuals, and that is literally us putting our hands on every single one of them, and it's a lot. Looking at the table on the right side here, I have organized these by the species that we encounter the most in the trawls, which are white shrimp and bay anchovy. Followed by some of these other ones, the Atlantic reef squid, spot, weak fish is way down here. You don't see spotted sea trout, but they do show up in our trawls. But what's interesting is if you look at the total individuals that we see of each of these species, bay anchovy by far is a lot more. Now, remember that graph that I showed you where they were in decline. Again, I don't know if that's a real decline. I don't know if that's a cyclical decline, and they'll come back up again with the cyclical patterns in some of the Atlantic oscillations. But imagine if this is a really numerous little fish. It's an important prey species for a lot of our sport species that we like. And if it is actually in a real decline, and even if it's in only a temporary decline, how might that affect the food web within the entire estuary? So that's something that we can't get at yet, but that's the hope this monitoring program that we will be able to get at that. And of course, I got to show pictures and I have hundreds of pictures, and it would just be a messy collage. And it's really interesting that the numerous different kinds of species that we get. You know, this, a lot of people probably don't see. This is a southern hake. We catch a lot of these in Sapelo, and it's very seasonal when you see them. You don't see them all year round. We catch endangered species in Altamaha. We're not excited to see these. It's very anxious on our net. They're the first ones that come out. We baby them like they're our own children, put them back in the water. This is an Atlantic sturgeon here, and this is a young of the year. So it was just born this year, and it's really exciting to see that for a species that was so on the brink, you know, obviously having successful spawning. Oh, huge. I want to say 6 feet. I mean, they're big fish when they're full grown. What is a bay anchovy? It is, they're not commercially viable here because they're really fragile. And even in our nets, even with how careful we are, they're just one of those species that you pick up and it's dead. They just want to die very quickly on you. So they would never make it to market. There is a slightly larger anchovy we have that's a lot less numerous than the bay anchovy, called a striped anchovy. And they do actually sell those down in Florida. So you do see them down there. You can eat bay anchovies, they just don't really. Yeah. Down here is one of the only 2 sea catfish that we have in our estuaries. We also have the hardhead catfish. This is a gaff topsail catfish, and why it's really interesting to see these fish is because they have been not seen or encountered as much as they used to be. And so there's been some concern about what's going on with their population, but very few people are studying them. So I'm happy to see the young recruits in our nets. We do catch game fish. Does anyone want to guess what that is? That is a spotted sea trout. You can see the little spots here. And the way you really tell this from like a weak fish are the spots in the tail. And this is another really common fish, but this is when they're juveniles and they don't look like they're adult forms. This is an Atlantic croaker. And that's an Atlantic croaker. Yeah, and it's probably maybe 1.5 inches long. They're pretty tiny. This one is a southern hake. Hake, H-A-K-E. It's might be relatives of the lingcod that you see up in the Pacific. So just in general, our results so far, we've had 83 species and counting. Since I made that slide, we've had a lot more trawls. So we've had over 250 trawls. We're continuing to do this. We have counted over 50,000 individuals. And let me tell you, when you pull up a net with 3,000 star drummond, it is a long time to sit there and count them. That doesn't happen all that often. The training, we've had 2 classes with the Coastal College of Georgia students. We held them in the evening or in the morning during one of their class times. They came to Merrick's to do it. So we've engaged over 30 potential volunteers, now have had 2 interns, and we're going to be offering 2 more internships from that cohort this year through Merrick's. This is a nice little video. But
Juvenile Estuarine Fish Monitoring Project is my PowerPoint. So background, I mean, just to reiterate what we have done, we had 3 study locations. The Altamaha down here on the left. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm gonna move it around anyways. The Doughboy up here up on the top right, and the Sapelo Sound on the bottom right. So at each location, we had 11 sampling stations at each site, and we sampled twice a month. Usually it was, when we set a date, we did it back to back in 1 week. And we had 5 collaborative partners that worked on this project to help us collect the data. So our team, that is us, me, Chandler, Brian, and Lisa. Our positions, Lisa was our fearless boat captain, and Brian here, he was the educator and the comic relief on board. And, you know, me and Chandler there helped out a little bit. Our responsibilities, we did the netting on the boat. We had to deploy the trawl net and do the 5-minute trawls to collect the fish. And once we brought them on board, we ID'd and measured the fish. We also took water quality measurements, and we were taking the boat speed and air quality there for a minute before we lost that before we lost that machine. And let's see, next one. We caught an abundance of fish. I included a few pictures for you guys to look at. At each site specifically, this is not a total for all combined, but we caught a total of 59 different species so far at Sapelo Sound. We caught a total of 50 different species at Doughboy Sound, and a total of 33 different species at Altamaha. And I for the most part, I learned most of these species on this trip. I knew a few going into it, but that was definitely the biggest key takeaway, was learning all these different species. And I have carried that with me, and I will carry that with me wherever I go next. I've thoroughly enjoyed this experience. My experience, here's all the pictures of me enjoying my time out there on the boat. A little bit of background for me: I grew up in North Georgia, and I started fishing on Lake Lanier since I could walk. And so fishing has always been a part of my life, and this gave me the opportunities to see it from a different angle, using the trawl net, and of course being on the marine side of things. So this project, again, I can't thank you enough for Dr. Demi that first introduced me to you guys, and for you guys giving me the chance to come out on the project and work with you all and learn everything that I did. This project actually was the first time that I've had a career direction that I'm going towards, and I will be keeping. I want to do something with fisheries, and this is where it all started.
All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
So I know it's supposed to be like 5 minutes, and if
Perfect.
I keep talking, I'll start rambling.
So here's my experience with the juvenile fish monitoring for UGA. First things first, what I learned during this internship. First off, I learned how to measure a species. This was very, very helpful because, I never really did anything like this before. And if I did, it was very small. So, well, I remember like doing this in fisheries, but getting to know more about that was very, very helpful. And learning how to measure a small fish, shrimp, blue crab, stingray was great. I'm hoping to take that with me in the future. And yeah, with the fish, we mostly measured from the head to the tail. And one thing I also learned is that, and I was told this a lot, is with a fish, you just got to measure it. Just measure it, get as best you can, and then move on. Because, you can't just be sitting there for, like 5 minutes figuring out what, the measurement of this fish is, So getting to do that more efficiently was very, very, very helpful. Second is how to identify common fish species. At first, I didn't really know much difference between these three. And it was difficult for me. Oh, and also these little names next to the pictures, those are photo credits. But as I did the internship more and more, I was able to figure out, okay, here's what a stardom looks like, here's what a silver perch looks like, and here's what a weak fish looks like. Here's how I can tell the difference. And
watch it on the YouTube later if you'd like. This is our interns talking about what the experience meant for them.
Now, Estuarine Fish Monitoring.
So what's next? Obviously, I'm going to continue the trawling, continue this monitoring. And I'm going to consider new techniques for monitoring. Trawling's kind of the biggest bang for your buck, but maybe hook and line sampling would also be a good piece of data to have in our database, as well as seining or whatever other people are doing out there, we can fold these in as part of our overall monitoring effort to understand how we're not changing in our estuaries. We're looking at creating a pocket guide to estuarine fishes, especially those little fish that are really hard. And I mean, my coworker, Brian, or colleague, Brian Flick from Merrick's, he wants to make it called What's My Bait, or what is that bait? So people understand that not everything that you're picking out of the water that's a small fish is necessarily bait for your hook. It could be a small trout, it could be a small redfish. We have an intern now who has illustrated children's books. So we are in discussion right now, developing a children's book to introduce children to the estuarine fishes and kind of, you know, the game fish, the sports fish, the commercial fish, but also all those other fish that are out there too. Obviously, this is never intended to be just an academic or government partnership. So I want to expand the training to the general public. And also expand the cooperative to bring more groups in to be a part of it. And I've been in contact with some bait fishermen in McIntosh County who are really interested in being a part of this as well. And then once we gather enough data, it's going to take at least years to look at some of these trends. We'll start actually doing some serious analysis of it. And that hopefully goes into the future. So with that, I want to say thank you for your attention. You have. It's okay. Yeah, I can go back. Oh. So it's in the Tularosa Basin here. I was contracted after my master's to work on the Holloman Air Force Base out in the White Sands Missile Range, which you might know, that's where the Trinity site is. Holloman is where the first vehicle escaped Earth's orbit. So there's a lot of the space-based stuff there. And it's a really neat Air Force base to be on. And the really neat thing about it is because it's an Air Force base, a lot of its land and surrounded by a missile range, a lot of its land is very protected. But they want to be able to continue doing their mission, and they had two species on the base that they were concerned about their habitat being impacted in the future by climate change out there. So they asked me to come out there and measure the habitat and understand what was going on. And that was for the western burrowing owl, which I really loved owls. I thought that was great. And the white sands pupfish. I'm like, find a fish. I wasn't all that excited about doing the white sands pupfish. I was more excited about the burrowing owls. But here you can see on the right, this gives you an idea of where we are down here. It's really interesting about it, and I noticed immediately when I got here on the coast is we have a lot of the same species here, plant species, as we see in New Mexico in this basin. And what we call this is a, don't be fooled by these blue lines here. This is a closed basin. There is absolutely no fresh water running in here, a riverine system. And only on heavy rains will these actually flow here, but for the most part, it's dry. But we have, yucca species, the Spanish bayonet's a yucca species, your prickly pear. This is a salicornia species, which we also see all outside on the salt marsh here. Also pickleweed, is what they call it here. I'd actually call it there too. And then this is saltgrass, which you see here as well. And this is a zoom in on the White Sands Missile Range. Here's Holloman Air Force Base. And what you're seeing here are the few places that there is perennial or year-round water because the water table is so high at these points. Now, this is all surrounded by gypsum sands, which means these waters are they're not potable, it's not drinkable, it's really salty or can be very, very salty. And so the one that I was studying was here on, and this is the native range of the white sands pupfish. This fish is only found here in this creek, in this little spring, and in this river. And that's it. Nowhere else in the world, right there. And this is what that creek looks like. So, I mean, or they call that the Lost River. That's it. Like it's it. So it's really not a lot of water or anything. And what was crazy when I was doing the temperature and measuring, like, well, what's the salinity of this? How does it change? It would go from fresh 50 parts per thousand. Ocean is only 35 parts per thousand. So things could get really concentrated in this creek or this river. And then the daily temperatures could go up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And sometimes, because these were really shallow creeks and really shallow portions, they go down to freezing too. And if you had, say, in our spring or winter, where we have wild temperature changes in the high desert, where you go from freezing at night, maybe 60 or 70 in the day, I mean, whatever's living in there is experiencing this rapid change. And if we have monsoon seasons, then they're also experiencing rapid salinity changes. So it can go to fresh to salt pretty darn quickly. And they just didn't care. The biologist on site had a aquarium where he was keeping some of these white sands pupfish, and he asked someone to change the water, and they didn't realize it was a saltwater tank and dumped fresh water in there. Fish weren't even phased at the time. So that was when I realized, and you would just see puddles, like most of the river had dried up, this big, and it's full of fish. And the fish they were very resourceful. They would use my equipment to lay their eggs, and I'd peek in them, and there'd be all these little fry in there. It was really neat. And nothing else could live in there except, like, there was a lot of blue-green algae that could survive there, and they fed off of that. They were also cannibalistic, so that's why the little fish were hiding so much. So yeah, it was really, really a neat place. And that was really when I realized just how neat fish were. There was one more question before well, that's hopefully we can expand our teams. Obviously, we picked the sounds that we're in because it's convenient for us to get to. But if I can expand to other fishermen or people interested in maybe the university up here, I don't know. We would expand out here. I would love to be expanded more than our current kind of constrained region. Thank you.
Okay, so we had quite a May with the banquet and with the kids fishing event, and normally we take July and August off. And from a seminar standpoint, we're going to have no seminars in July or in August. However, we do have some other events scheduled. We have a freshwater fishing fish seining will be Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. So if you're interested in going in the water and actually seining for fish out here at the landings, Rich Hackett in the back there, raise your hand, Rich. He's our leader in that, and this is about at least the 11th year you've done this, Rich, and it's collecting quite a bit of data on that. We're looking at predator-prey ratios and surveying the fry. Also, same night, Tuesday and Wednesday, we've expanded. We've had a lot of interest in fly fishing, and so we had fly fishing clinic. We had back in April, and we subsequently had a clinic, and it was more people than we could handle. So we're doing mini clinics now at the Kids Fishing Lagoon of all places, with all those little bluegill down there, all those big bluegill down there. And so we'll be having fly fishing clinics on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. We handle up to 12 people, and you need to be pre-registered and a member of CCA. Or if you're not a member, you can join at the event for $35, and that's your annual membership. On June 25th, we start our Castaway Club series. So on Saturday mornings, June, July, August, and September, Susie Fusco runs a Castaway Club, where we have about a 45-minute presentation on a kid's level, 5 to 15 age range. We have snakes, alligators, crabs, birds, everything imaginable out there. And we have someone present to the kids where they get to hold, touch, and learn about different animals that are indigenous to our area. And then followed following that, we'll have 1 hour of instructional fishing for the kids. It's usually a crowd of about 20, and we can use volunteers for that if you're available, or if you just want to come and watch. You may even learn something. That's on the 25th. We do this will be the 5th year we've worked with Safe Shelter. I don't know if you're familiar with Safe Shelter or not. The purpose of Safe Shelter is a battered women's shelter. And this is the kids from there. They have an 8-week summer camp called Camp Rock. And one of the highlights of their 8-week summer camp is fishing here at the landings. We take them to the kids' lagoon, and they get to fish for a couple hours. And then we work with the fire department there, and they roll out their engines. The kids get to climb through the fire engines. They get to turn on the sirens, the lights. And the firemen talk to the kids about the importance of education and why reading is important, why math is important, why science is important in conjunction with their job. Everybody wants to be a fireman. We'll have another Castaway Club. Let's see, the first one is going to be, first Castaway Club is going to be about birds and butterflies. Butterflies, for the birds and butterflies are free. And we'll have a speaker there and some actual birds and or butterflies. On July 23rd, it'll be about owls, and they're bringing a real owl for the kids to see. They'll be talking about owls. Afterwards, we'll be fishing. And then the third one in August is going to be about snakes, and we're going to have snakes there for the kids to handle too. So that'll be fun. Get a lot of squealing going on. So that's it in terms of what we have coming up, but it's all about volunteers. We only ask for money once a year. That was back in January, February, March. And this is how we spend our money, educating the kids on and off the island. So tonight we have raffle. And what do we have, Stan? We have a rod and reel. And it's going to be 2 winners. Is that right, Vic? 2 winners. And everybody have your tickets. And hey, Steve Hernandez. Great. Happy Father's Day.